wasn't so light and blown out because the light's coming from behind, then everything might have ended up too contrasty and you wouldn't be able to pick him out right away. I think one of the biggest differences between working in film and working in illustration, my teacher told me this in school and it's always stuck with me, is that the difference is the amount of time a person gets to appreciate something that's on the screen. Like a shot can happen and it's over in 2 seconds, and so in those 2 seconds you have to sell whatever is happening on the screen, and therefore it's really important to make things clear. Whereas in an illustration you have time to kind of look around and look at all the little details, but in film simplicity and just impact is very, very important.
Okay. So the next question I have is, well, actually, no, it's more of a request if they would love to see your process. So
Okay.
I guess an example of some of the things you just discussed would be great. And while you're preparing for that, next question is, I know you are skilled in both realistic and cartoon style art. Is it hard to jump from one style to the other?
I've always actually, that's interesting because I always felt like I was more of a realistic artist. Coming to Disney was kind of a change, or I mean any animation actually is kind of like trying to figure out what the style is and the level of characterization. So it's interesting to me to hear that because I normally don't think of myself in that way. But it is a lot of fun to play with the two, and another great part about being a biz dev artist and working with directors is that they all have a very specific, idea of what they want their film to be, and it's fun to kind of, just mentally dissect that and decide, okay, what does this person want? I mean, he's telling me this stuff, but being able to kind of visualize the final product that they're envisioning is really interesting to me. As far as process, I chose this because this isn't related to any project. It's just fun stuff that I do on my own because, I don't know, I like girls and swords, and cute girls are always fun to draw. But for something, but I guess it would be easier to show some of my process here. So what I would usually do is, going off of a sketch, I use a lot of masks when I'm starting out because I had taken James Pake's class, and he had really very well demonstrated how awesome masks can be, and now I can't even use it without it. But oh yeah, and by the way, I think somebody asked this a while ago and I just didn't answer it because I talked too much. I use a set of brushes that's a combination of Sparth brushes that I downloaded a long time ago and James Pake brushes, and then some brushes that I experiment with here and there. But those are the ones. I think I uploaded my brushes a while ago onto somewhere, but I can't remember where. But I'm usually, I think sharing stuff is best. I mean, I just think it's just, if you guys have cool brushes, you should share them, and if I got cool brushes, I would share them, because art is such a great community and it's fun to be a part of that. Sorry, this is somebody else's computer, so I'm not actually sure how his brushes are set up. I'll try and figure it out. But yeah, so if you can see, I have duplicated these girls and then have a color layer underneath, and so I can see what I'm masking out. So I'll start by masking out my character's shape, since good design always is simple, It's not always, but it's good to have strong design be, organized into shapes, large shapes, and then medium shapes, and then small shapes. And that way, you've visually organized your picture in a way for others to consume, and the faster that they get it, I feel like there's definitely a correlation between that and good design. So this is really small.
Okay. And actually, while you're doing that, I have a couple of questions that relate more to just, I guess, the education industry itself. So how actually important is the choice of university when you try to apply to a big studio like Disney? Do you think this could affect
Ooh,
an aspiring artist's chances, or is it all mostly just hard work and good luck?
that's kind of a loaded question just because there's so many different ways that you can go about it. I mean, there's so many artists that get into, big studios with no education at all, and then there's some that swear by it. So it's difficult to give a straight answer, and it's kind of a cop-out to say whatever feels right to you. But for me, I found that I don't regret going to, an art school because it focused my attention. I realized while I was in it what kind of work I wanted to do. Originally, I was an illustration major, and just thought I want to draw for a living. I don't necessarily know what this whole animation industry is about. So it is also is a measure of good luck. But I think whatever you decide, there is a measure of just hard work that goes into it that will take you the furthest. I mean, like CGMA is great because they give you this alternate, you know, schooling experience that you don't have to sign up for your college to get, and they have some great teachers. And so I find any combination of, actual school or online classes like these can be helpful as long as you're still drawing and you're still working really, really hard, and that's why I can't give you a really great answer as to why one is better than the other.
I think you did a pretty good job with that. And in the same token, another question that came up was, statement first and then the question. I love character design and feel that it's my strength, but I'm not good at background design at all. Do you think a visual development artist should know both or focus on just one aspect?
Oh, I'm mostly a background person, and I'm not a character designer. So, but personally, I still find it really useful to at least be able to put a human figure together. And so I feel like it's the same with, you know, uh, character artists. You don't have to be the best. You don't have to do these full-blown paintings and be able to do the job of an environment artist as well. But being able to place your character within a space and have it be believable is really great, because one of the things I know that they look for at Disney and other places is just good draftsmanship, and I think as long as you're a good draftsman and you understand perspective and space, and characters always have perspective too. They aren't immune to that. And so if you can nail those aspects, your designs just kind of come through a lot clearer. One of our character designers, Shiyun, is amazing because he thinks of himself as a character artist, but I've seen him draw things that aren't characters and put them into space and have them be really believable. And it always adds something, I think, definitely.
So,
But
in
again, you don't have to be, you don't have to be James Pake or anything for your time.
there's only one of him. Um,
Yeah.
in the industry, is it better to have specialty in one area, such as VizDev, or be able to specialize in more than one area of production?
Um, I think that it's always like people are always excited by the idea of being like of an artist being able to do multiple things, especially at smaller companies. But I think what's more important is that when you have your portfolio, you put what you want, like what you envision yourself doing for the next 5, 10 years in there. So you're really representing what you think your strongest skill set is and what excites you about doing the job. And so if that comes clear, then and you're really good at it, it's all about just figuring, if you like to do all of it, great, then put all of it in your portfolio. But if you think that your strong suit is really just doing paintings, focus on that, but also don't forget that you never want to, I don't know, it's just so hard to say, because all of the really great artists that I admire are really good at a lot of different things, but it just comes from being a great artist and a great draftsman, You know, I mean, like there's no way that you can get better at drawing characters and not at the same time get better at drawing environments. I just don't think that's, one can be better than the other, but learning isn't, you know, a specific thing. You learn across all different types of art when you're just practicing, you know. So I, my, I don't know if it's like a philosophy or anything like that. I just think that if you are a good drawer, then you can draw anything. Like Ian McKeg does this all the time. He's great at figure stuff, but he can compose shots and he can, you know, do storyboards and all this other stuff. And it's never, you're never going to leave one area behind just because you're getting really good at another, you know. You're always going to get better as long as you're practicing whatever it is you're drawing.
Right.
I feel like I've gotten better at characters since I started at Disney just doing environments. So.
Awesome.
That's just what I feel, though. I'm not sure.
Nope, that's
I don't
fine.
know if this is proven.
Well, how much research goes into your environments, and how do you stay inspired under what I assume is an intense pressure from a looming deadline?
Well, research is very important because a lot of times when gathering reference and stuff, I'll have kind of an idea, oh, this will be really cool, kind of to get this feeling in there. But then while you're looking at reference, you can see a lot of cooler stuff that you normally wouldn't have, you know, what's it called, thought of on your own. So reference is really important, and then they add like a level of believability to your work. And so it's something that I know Disney takes very seriously, and I do too. And so whenever, like for example, I actually just got off of Big Hero 6, and I'm working on a new project now. And so when I started, it was a brand new project. So what I did is just sat down, kind of like thought about what it was they were looking for, and just looked up a ton of references that kind of reinforce the design ideas that they had mentioned and things like that. And then I think that working from there, you just end up getting such a stronger head start and a more solid idea of what you do, because if you don't have a good idea of what you want your final piece to be, then it's then you know it just makes everything harder.
Okay.
So I'm just masking. I can't believe how long it's taken me to mask this lady out. This is crazy.
I'm scrolling back up to some of the other questions. A lot of them are basically relating to what you're already doing now and doing a demo, in essence.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just skipping ahead to see if there is another one here. Do you have much time for personal work?
I think I do. I mean, on my own, I do a lot of drawings and sketches, and like I said, mostly of pretty girls because they're kind of easy and they're like a stress reliever almost. But I do have time for personal work, and a lot of the artists I work with do a lot of things on their own too. Like they're very prolific in doing their own books and going to conventions, and so. But you really do have to find a balance. Sometimes going to work and just working on a project that you can't show for years and years and years takes a lot out of you, and I find doing personal work is a great way to kind of detox from all of that and refocus yourself and, you know, have some fun. Because, you know, I'm not going to lie, production and doing these paintings are fun, but sometimes when you get into a grind, there are things like model packeting that needs to be done and stuff that's a lot more technical that takes a lot of time, and somebody has to do them. Everybody has to kind of like do their part, and it takes a lot out of you, you know, to just, you know, do model packets and orthographic drawings, you know, all the time. And so personal work is a good way to kind of get away from that.
Right.
Yeah.
So what are you doing right now as far as this illustration? You're just still masking?
Right now, I finished masking, so you can see I've only masked out this girl, so this is basically how I started when I was doing this practice piece, like drawing a character and painting it so that there's a little bit of stylized dimension to it. I always find that kind of thing very interesting. The instructor for the course, Ryan, does this very well, and so and it's kind of important to know. It's not perfect, the mask, but this is kind of what I do to start. And then what I always do is, now that I have this shape of this girl cut out, I parent a new layer. I use a lot of parenting because it, you know, it just, you don't have to worry about compromising the final shape that you wanted from this design, and that's always important. So I've masked it out, I have a new layer, and then what I do is I just go in and start painting. I'm just going to cheat and use the colors already picked because I don't want to think about it. But after that, you see, since everything is contained within the mask and I've parented my color layers, I just block in the basic color shapes that I want for this painting. I do this with I know it's a character and it's different from the environment work that I've shown, but I do this with the Sugar Rush paintings also. Actually, since it's a matte painting, all of these truffles are all on a separate layer, because in the end, these separate layers have to be projected back onto 3D models for the stereo. And so all of these truffles are on different layers, and then the ground plane is on a separate layer, and then whenever you see overlap of some lollipops in front of the truffle, that's also a separate layer, up until I think right around here. And then it becomes just parallaxing layers. So this is all one layer, and then this behind here is another layer, and then the sea is another layer. So this masking thing I use all the time for pretty much everything, because it keeps my files organized, and I paint within the lines just like I did in first grade, and it makes a lot of sense to me. So I chose like a kind of a flesh tone for her, and then I'll create another layer for things that kind of overlap, like her jeans.
Okay. This question basically is asking, as you work on several projects, do you usually alternate between departments? Like, you are now doing background, and the next project is storyboards, and another is character animation?
No. I mean, there's a little bit overlap in that you can, if you feel like, oh, I have this great idea for this sequence and I want to pitch it, you can do that. But for the most part, you know, the story department is really good at what they do, and VizDev is good at what they do, and so you just kind of trust that those people who are working in those different departments have got it, you know, and there's not a lot of like overlap, and there's not a lot of moving around departments unless you want to. I mean, there have been cases where, you know, especially at studios where you can start out doing something, you know, be like, oh, actually, I think what I really want to do is storyboards, and you can switch disciplines, but they don't really happen so much on the fly, you know. This is cool too, because then you can, at this point I take this off, so then you can click it on and off and see how you're doing. But I just basically start off blocking in the shapes. And then this is where another thing I really like about doing this process is adding shadows. This is actually something I learned from James. Well, first I'll add a multiply layer. I decide what it is I want the shadows to be, and I think I decided on this light source because I like the idea of the fan casting a shadow on her face. So I use kind of like a gray. Sometimes I go a little bit warmer or cooler in the grays because I don't like just, you know, the pure gray multiply layer. Eventually you'll paint back into it, and then that'll help you get variation within your shadows. But this is just a way for me to kind of figure out what the major light and shadow shapes are. And then this way I focus not on like each of the individual little things and how they cast shadows, but how it gets tied together as a whole, so that you kind of organize the shapes within your biggest shape, which is your character, you know.
Okay. So another question here. Someone who's interested in signing up for this particular CGMA class you'll be teaching, they would like to know, is there anything they can do on their own time to help prepare for the class?
I used to do a lot of just studies from movies with good lighting. Oh man, and that's why even on my blog goes back like 5 years. It's really embarrassing. There's some really good stuff on there. But if you go, see, now I'm using like a cheesy overlay layer, but it won't look like this, I promise. It's all about moderation. But it does give you kind of like just enough to kind of get started. Anyway, back to the question. I did a lot of film studies, especially films that have great cinematography and great lighting, because like just intuitively while you're doing it, you're copying something, so you're not necessarily making the decisions for yourself when you're painting it, but you intuitively kind of grasp things. Like a lot of art is just, I like kind of dissecting it and thinking about why something is the way it is, but also a lot of it is just based on just feeling for some reason. So when you're doing those studies, you're not just copying, you're learning from them and seeing, you know, oh, when warm light hits this, it does this, or like this shadow is blue because of all the light coming from the sky, the fill light. And so after you kind of understand the basics, you start seeing it everywhere and being able to use it and like break those rules. I think this guy is too dark. So, I mean, as you can see, I mean, I pretty much use Photoshop to its full potential. I don't think there's anything wrong with using photos or filters or anything like that, because at the end of the day, what's going to come across is the decision making that you make to create this piece. As long as you're in control of what you're doing and you don't let, you know, the technology or the photos that you use overtake what it is you're trying to accomplish, then I think that's the way to go. Because I get a lot of questions too about using photos, and I don't use photos not because I think it's not cool or whatever, just because I don't know how to use them well, and so they look kind of bad, and so I just don't. But there's nothing wrong with it at all. Like, as long as the final artist is totally in control of what they're trying to do and the image they're trying to convey, then do whatever needs to get done, because I mean, this is our job, you know. This is kind of like what we do.
Actually, and I have a couple technical questions related to Photoshop in specific, well, in particular. One viewer basically said that he noticed you turn down the fill on the layer. What is the difference between fill and opacity?
I'm not actually sure, to be completely honest. I just, I mean, I just knew that I didn't like, I think I actually went for opacity and I accidentally clicked fill because I'm nervous. But I know that there's a difference, and Ryan could probably tell you, and after this I'm going to go check with him just so I know from now on. But I just knew that that layer was coming on too strong, and I just play with the either one of these to get kind of like to get it to the way that I want it. So it's not just in your face, this is dodged all the way to hell, you know?
Right. Well, actually, to chime in a little bit, I mean, it's not a purely technical like answer to the question, but from what
Oh
I
yeah, you
know and
totally
what is
know. Yeah.
basically, in my experience, the the opacity controls the overall layer's, I guess, transparency, and that for the most part has no effect on the amount of I guess, well, one controls the layer in its entirety, and one only the layer's effects, basically. So you apply like
Oh,
filter,
okay.
like drop shadows or bevel and embossing and stuff like that. Turning down the opacity will basically, you know, turn all the opacity down for that layer, but while the fill is only concerned with the actual effects themselves. But I could have it backwards, so don't quote me 100%. But I know one controls the entire thing, and one only controls the effects themselves. So
I don't know. That sounds pretty good. That's better than I don't know. So we
we
can
can always
take it.
Google it as well.
Yeah, but basically the reason I did it though was just to cut down on the crazy glow, and a lot of, I mean, so now it's just getting into the part where I actually have to like go in and paint and figure out what it is I'm painting, and this is the part that's always super unpredictable. I mean, I was telling Ted earlier, it's really hard for me to talk about the actual painting process because so much of it happens on the fly. I mean, I feel like every single painting I do, I don't know what is going to happen, and all I have to fall back on is just trusting that the decisions I'm making aren't completely crazy. But there are some things but they're definitely like tricks and things that I know that Photoshop does that I can experiment with and see what works and what doesn't, that definitely helps it along. And masks is one of them. Using layer effects is another part of it. I mean, and then another thing that's cool, I mean, I guess I'll just show you guys this thing that I find is really cool, that is helpful. So if you have a piece like this, and you're like, oh, well, the light is hitting it, but what if you want some like lighting effects on it? What I'll do is I'll just duplicate the layer. This is for lit objects, though. Actually, you know what? Maybe I should choose one of these. Yeah, because another thing that's really cool that I like is Photoshop is cool for is trying to get actual like photographic tricks in there, like how light reacts in the camera lens. And because, I mean, it's CG, and so all of that stuff, you know, that you get for free in live action, like cool light bloom and rim lights and things like that, you kind of take for granted. It just doesn't happen naturally within the computer. Like artists have to create it. Like Paperman, towards the end, the lighters had to add a lot of lighting, bloom, and effects. Oh, actually, you know what? That's a good idea. I should do it on this one. Because the lighting in Paperman is very strong, and so it's easy to do something like that, like for this image. Of course, we painted in this blown-out light because we wanted him really backlit, so that was kind of the idea. And so something I would do in a piece like this to kind of give the extra idea of like the bloom, especially around the edges of objects being lit from the back, is I duplicate the layer, and then I do this cheesy thing where I blur it. It's like Gaussian blur. If you know this already, I'm sorry, so just bear with me. And then I will turn this layer to lighten. And so if you can see the difference, you really get, because it's the same layer, but when you blur it, the light bleeds into the dark area, so it's all blurry. But then when you do lighten, the only areas that change are where, you know, something is lighter. So the dark part here doesn't change so much because it's the same layer and it's the same value. But then because you get the bleed, you get this kind of nice bloom around the edges. And of course you can't, sometimes it's better to, and then what I'll do is I'll mask the whole layer out and just be like, all right, I only want light blooming around, around where the train car, where the light actually hits, you know, and then so you can paint into it. And then give, I mean, it's kind of subtle, but you can really see it like on his arm right there. And so it gives you an extra feeling of light. We didn't do this for in the paintings, the lighters did, but it's one of an easy way, or like a tip, I don't know, a trick that really helps, you know, get the feeling of strong lighting across. So I use that a lot. I don't know if that's relevant.
It is. It's a wonderful technique, actually. And one of our viewing participants basically submitted the actual definition for us for the
awesome.
fill versus opacity. So I kind of was right. I think I had the inverted, but fill affects the pixel information and ignores the layer effects, while opacity affects both the layer and the effects themselves. So,
awesome.
So
I
thank
knew we
you
could count
so
on
much
the
for that,
internet.
Devon. So that was awesome. But let's get back to some more interesting questions I was skimming through. Now, this one was interesting, and I'm not sure if it's myth or not, but maybe you can shed some light on it. Is personal work conflicting with your contract work with Disney? Basically, Rebecca here wants to know, like, she's heard that many large studios own whatever you do on and off the clock. Does that worry you that your personal work is no longer yours?
First of all, I feel like that kind of thing is mainly a, what's it called? Mainly to protect Disney. And so, or to protect whatever it is the company is, and that's why you see, I know a lot of students are concerned because when you're submitting a portfolio to a big company like Sony or Disney, they always have this agreement that you have to sign that says whatever you send them, they own. And so I know a lot of students are very worried about that, and all I have to say is that, you know, it's there to protect the studios so that they don't get sued. I mean, you've probably experienced this, Ted, where at Dreamers Remember when somebody tried to sue for Kung Fu Panda,
Yes.
things like that. So I think it's mainly there to kind of shield the studio, but I think personal work that I do of this nature where it's not, conflicting with whatever the studio is doing, because this is not going to be a Disney movie. Let's be very, very clear. They're not going to do one about Ninja Girls or anything like that. Um, while if they wanted to exercise their rights, they could. I'm not so worried about it because it's just work that I do on my own, not at the studio, and that I'm not even going to sell or anything like that. So I'm not going to make a show out of it or anything. So I don't really think about that stuff, but it does come into play, like I'm doing this book with some of the other girls at Disney and a gallery show, and so what we did is companies have carve-out contracts where you say, oh, this is a project that we're going to be working on. It's going to be, in books and sold, and therefore we need a carve-out contract that says the stuff that we do, the material that we do for that, we own, and Disney doesn't. And so they're very flexible with that kind of thing. And I've done
Yeah.
freelance for, I mean, this is really weird. I did freelance really quickly doing drawings for the Host movie, I don't know, the Stephanie Meyer thing or whatever, and I got a carve-out contract to do that because it's another movie. But because it was live action and the stuff I was doing, it was mainly just prop work, not even concept design, and it's so far removed. They were like, okay, here's a carve-out contract, you just sign it, and then whatever you do for that show is whatever, and then it all works out pretty well.
Right. And actually, to chime in a bit, I also have those same kind of, they call them outside service agreements, basically, where
Yeah.
if you're doing something that may potentially be a conflict of interest pertaining to what you do for the studio versus what you're doing personally, they typically want their legal departments to go over the actual thing you're doing to make sure there's nothing that is infringing on, what they're paying you to do, basically. So in most
Yes,
cases,
exactly.
if you're submitting work to be reviewed, it's more related to the fact that they don't want to because in essence they have no way of really mailing back all this work to people, right? So they want you to
Yeah.
know that when you mail in a portfolio or a demo reel of some type, that the ownership is not, as far as your intellectual property. It's more that the physical material is going to be destroyed or thrown away. So they're not going to be responsible for that in that case. But once you're an employee creating content, they have you sign these type of agreements, so as Helen said, to protect themselves from the off chance you may come back and say, well, that was originally my idea and you stole it from me, kind of thing. So they want you to be perfectly understood and clear that this work that you're doing is for hire. It's for us to create X, Y, and Z, whatever, in the future.
Right.
So, but no, we have those too actually as well. So it's
Yeah,
funny.
I think all of the major studio does, and as long as you're not doing something weird like freelancing for DreamWorks, Blue Sky, and Disney,
Yes,
that can be kind of like
that's a
a
conflict of
little
interest. Yeah,
moral thing. Yeah,
right.
but otherwise it's like unless I always feel like it's Disney is such a big company, and a lot of the artists do personal work, and they actually, really kind of love it when artists branch out on their own, and it makes the studio look better too. If they have artists that do a lot of personal work and they're very active in the community, their goal isn't to sequester all your work for themselves. They're just trying to protect themselves from the off chance, like Ted said, that you may want to sue them for taking your idea or something. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I think that almost never happens.
Right.
But I could be
But
wrong
it's
also.
that
I'm
one
very
that
new in the
only takes that
industry.
one time, and
Yeah,
it scares them. Uh,
yeah.
so some more technical questions about what you're doing right now in Photoshop. Well, this first one actually is a little bit more general. It says, "Hi, Helen. When figuring out a composition, I've seen a lot of artists use different methods, i.e. James, rule of third, Ryan's opposing planes. What method would you say you follow to create a compelling composition?"
Oh, if only you knew the arguments I get into with other artists, specifically Ryan, about composition. I have less of an approach like they do. I kind of I think you guys kind of get the point where I kind of wing it sometimes. But I mean, what I love about doing VizDev is getting a script or just hearing what the story is and just visualizing in my mind how that shot could look. And it has to support the story, the feeling, the mood, and that stuff is the funnest for me. And then based on what that is, I go off on what I think is a good composition for that moment. It doesn't happen so much in Ralph because it was so far down the line, but for Frankenweenie it definitely did. Like things like this, like one, you have to show what the environment is, and then two, you kind of have to be like, well, it's a dark space. They took a lot of inspiration from Frankenstein's lab, and so you kind of like have to think of the general, I don't know, I have to find a good example, but it really depends on the story. So none of my compositions, I mean, there are definitely trends that I like to use, like having a foreground object, a middle object, and a far away one just for scale and things like that. So there's definitely trends that I use over and over again because I trust them. But at the same time, it always kind of depends on what it is you're trying to get across in your image and the story point. And let's see. I don't know if I have a good example. All right. Like I mean, please, sorry, I did this like 3 years ago, so it's not very good. But this is kind of like how I would start. I basically started with, this is the right moment right after Victor's dog has died. And so Victor is sad on his bed and he's in the darkness, and then I decided to relate him back to his parents being worried about him, but having them be backlit because they would be dark on light, and then and just having like those kind of thoughts when I'm composing an image. And this composition is bad. It's not very good because there are so many things I try to get across. Like, they're in the doorway worried about him, and he's in the dark, but he's highlighted by the light coming from the door. But then I decided, I was like, oh, what if there was a mirror on this door, and it was like, oh, cool reflection. And I try to get fancy, and then it kind of falls apart. So this is when I wasn't so used to it. But it generally shows kind of like the thought process that I went through to get to this moment, you know. So even if it is kind of like a bad composition because this is right in the middle and it's like they're evenly spaced, you really want a hierarchy of things. So, but that's kind of what I go through whenever I'm coming up with a painting, is thinking about what the story point is and trying to work backwards from that. I don't know if I have anything else that does that. Oh, like these ones. This is cool because it was just all I had to go off on was this pet cemetery, and trying to come up with different staging and ideas. Like for this one, you get kind of like a voyeuristic quality because of how low to the ground it is, and you see him walking up and trying to come up with these ideas, and how this one is sad because it's on a hill and it's a cemetery and there's a scary tree. Like that's the kind of stuff that I try to think about when I'm coming up with ideas. And a lot of times I do start like this, where I'll just scribble on paper or in Photoshop or whatever, just kind of basic shot and composition ideas. And then a lot of it goes back to film theory as well. I didn't take one of my biggest regrets in art school was not taking a lot of cinematography classes. I took one with Bill Perkins at CDA, and that was really helpful, but you really learn that composing things a certain way makes the viewer feel a certain way. And so learning that really helps you in your job. You know, like there are some film 101 things where it's like that you learn from Hitchcock movies that when used correctly in animated film, it's just another layer to add onto your painting that makes it feel impactful, you know. And so that's kind of the stuff. I mean, if you look at these, there are things that they have in common. Like I have a lot of like foreground elements, and he's framed by them. So very simple and very straightforward and kind of cliche. But you know, you want to get the point across that he's sad. You make it rainy and gloomy and have a scary tree, and it kind of I think the final shot is based off of this thumbnail. So it's things like that that I really like about film that I wish I kind of learned more about, and that it will like kind of, work into you work it into your work, you know.
Right.
But
Now, another
yeah, that's
question,
basically it.
and thank you for the answer, actually. It's very, 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 like the examples you gave were good examples to show just your process even back then versus now as well. So I think it's really
Yeah.
cool to see that. Um, uh, Another technical question was, what are the down arrow signs on your layers, and what is the benefit of it? And I know
Oh,
what
these
they are,
are.
but could you
Oh, okay.
share, what they are with the audience as far as?
Right. Okay. This is going to look crazy, so this is what we're going to do. So I have this, hold on, I'll just make this clearer. The down arrows are parenting. So I'm parenting one layer to another. That means that whatever I paint on these subsequent layers with the arrows will be contained by whatever layer it is I'm on. So if I unparent them, it goes crazy. So you can see I'm actually painting outside of the shape. But because I have my girl character masked out, when I parent these things back to this layer, then, I think it'll be clearer if I actually apply this layer mask. So now you can kind of see that it's just this girl on top of this really crazy pink purple thing. But if I parent them back on, they become, once again, like contained by the shape that they're being parented to, which is
These are
this layer.
basically called clipping masks in essence.
Yes, yes. And then, and see if I go to the original layer and I'm like, oh, well, I think her neck should be fatter. Then I can just do this and make her neck super fat, but it'll have all the layers that I painted on top of it with the colors still there. This is really useful because in one sense it forces me to evaluate the shape that I'm painting and how the design works,
Right. Okay. Sorry about that. Uh-oh. Helen, are you there? It looks like we lost Helen's audio. Okay, everyone, if you can give me a couple seconds to see if I can get contact back with Helen. I think we lost her mic. Just bear with me and I'll get her on as soon as possible.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. I don't know what happened. I'm sorry. Maybe Photoshop got too overwhelmed.
No problem. I thought I lost you actually, but that's fine. So there are a lot of people saying thank you for your answers. They really enjoy this webinar so far, and yeah, just lots of praises for you.
Oh, you guys are too nice.
Uh,
I like how there's praises and one of my answers was I don't know.
well, as a family, we got together and answered it together. So
I
we had.
know. Now it's a new trend. You guys have to do interactive ones from now on. It's like
um,
Jeopardy.
so the next question we have is, when you're developing character, environment, color design for a movie, how much time do you spend actually painting when you have to finish or develop a painting, and how do you manage that time? I guess this question's already been asked in one
Oh.
way. Um,
Yeah, but it's like sometimes you have deadlines, and there's not all shows will require full-blown paintings. Some with like some things where you just do a sketch is fine, or things like that. So it's not like you get these really intense workout type of paintings every single day. So it really depends on the show. But I find that like on this new show that I'm on, because I'm new to it and I'm super excited about it, and it's like a change in pace. I've been doing 2 to 3 paintings a week that aren't like brick or rail paintings, but kind of close and just exploring, and so that's really fun. But they don't come and tell me you need to have 3 paintings to show by this date. You know, they kind of go by ear for each of the artists and see what they can manage and what production needs are. And if it's early and there's not really any production needs, and you have more time to kind of like develop ideas and pitch them and do really nice paintings. But once you're on production, it's like, oh, we need this screwdriver. I don't know, like just anything that they need at that moment. Then it's kind of, sometimes you get like crunch time. But as at Disney, I feel like it's never really just do or die or anything. Like there's not a lot of pressure, like if you don't get this done, things won't go well or whatever. So because they're just, everybody's, like usually most of the people you meet in the animation industry are just great people. They're just very nice. And as a result, you don't get a lot of undue pressure or anything because they all respect what you do and you respect what they do, you know.
Okay. I actually have a question here from Ashley that asks, is VizDev the end-all be-all for you, or do you think that you like to grow into something else?
I like when I actually, it was funny because when I got the offer from Disney to be a trainee, technically if you think about it, it was kind of a step down because I was already working as a VizDev artist at the Cinnabar studio, and when I left, I was Henry was really nice, and he actually took me out to lunch and stuff, because he wanted to understand why I was leaving his studio, understandably, and so I was really scared, but he kind of like understood by the end of the lunch that, and he basically chalked it up to me being young and wanting to do everything, and I think a part of that is true. Like I want to try a bunch of different stuff. I mean, I recently just put together a sketchbook of just sketches that I want to sell at conventions. I don't know if it'll do well, but it was fun to put together, you know. I love comics. I loved working with Rick Heinrichs on Frankenweenie. He's a live action guy, and I would love to work on live action films. Like there's all this stuff that I want to do and that I think would be super duper fun. But for now, having, you know, a steady job drawing is nothing to, I mean, I feel incredibly lucky to even have like these opportunities. So I think I'm okay for now, but there are times when I'm like, oh, I'll make a comic, and then I'll do like one panel and then quit because I don't have a lot of discipline sometimes. But I mean, even doing the CGMA thing and teaching is something that I wanted to try because I thought it might be fun and it might be cool, and I always find that trying to quote-unquote teach somebody else, you kind of dissect what it is you're doing and you also learn from it. And so I just think it's cool to be open to whatever it is you want to do. I mean, I think doing book covers would be fun too. Like there's just so many options out there for an artist, and it's kind of one of the best jobs ever. I don't know. I mean, I don't even want to think about what I would have done if I went to like chemistry school or something. I think it would be awful, but not because the job is awful, but because I'm awful at it. So, you know, there's a lot of stuff.
Well, in light of that, actually, I have a couple questions from some viewers who want to know, in regards to CTN and other conventions, do you have any advice for people that are just getting themselves out there?
Oh, wow. It's really intimidating. I remember, like, because I think the CTN where I got hired at Frankenweenie was the first CTN ever, I think, and it was one of my first conventions ever, so it was very nerve-wracking, but I would just say take advantage of everything that you can. Really suss out, you know, things to do and people to meet. I mean, don't be, I mean, be a normal person, because that always helps. Don't feel like you have to present yourself in any sort of way, because you just kind of, like, I think being honest is the best policy, especially when meeting people that you haven't met before or things like that. But, you know, take advantage of what people offer. I mean, I think what it was I did the Raising the Bar recruiting that they had set up that year. So I submitted my portfolio. I just went out there and tried and didn't expect anything, but but you know, just be aware of what's happening and what you want to get out of the convention, and then, you know, make sure that you have those specific goals in mind. And I think you'll get, I mean, you'll get a lot out of any of those type of events. I mean, there's so few where just all these people who love the same thing can get together and just geek out about it. So it'll be fun no matter what. But if you want to go with a specific goal, then do that.
Yep. And CGMA will basically be there as well as Helen in her booth. And actually, a question here is, will your sketchbook be available at CTN?
Oh
They want
yeah,
to know.
yeah.
Perfect.
I don't know if it'll be good, but it'll be
It is
there.
going to be
You know.
amazing.
So.
Um, So I have a few more, a lot of questions still left unanswered, but we only have a short amount of time to do these sessions with. So I'm going to start wrapping up now with the last few questions. So I'm going to pick and choose of all the ones being submitted. There was a few that were submitted to me offline through email that I wanted to get to a couple of those.
Okay.
The first of those being, what was the best advice you received in terms of putting together the portfolio that got you your break-in?
Yeah. These portfolio questions are always really hard
Deep
to
and
answer because
profound.
well, there's just so many different things. Like, and there's just so many conflicting answers. Because I mean, I was in school not so long ago, and I remember asking people the same question, and people being like, "Oh man, you can't have more than 10 images. That seems desperate." And then, "Oh no, you have to put like 30 images because that'll show how much work you do and how fast you are and things like that." So there's all these different answers. But I mean, the best advice I think I got from it was just you know, make sure whatever you do put in your portfolio, whether it's 10 images or 20 images, that correctly, you know, shows your skill. Don't try to pad your portfolio with things that are not as good as the stuff you already have in there just because you feel like it needs a certain page count. So put your best stuff in there. Organize it also in a way that's really easy easy flowing, and really just, you know, consider each of the pages that you put in there and figure out, well, do I really need this? Does it make my portfolio seem weaker or confused? And another thing that helps is really thinking in your head who you want to cater your portfolio to. Not that, you know, because this is not always true, because Ryan's portfolio had a bunch of zombies and stuff, and Disney still wants it for some reason. But like it is helpful though to kind of think, okay, this is where I'm applying, so I want to show that I want to work on the project that they're developing. Is it geared towards that? I mean, I don't know that you would submit a portfolio for Wizards of the Coast to like Nickelodeon or Disney TV for Gravity Falls. Do you know what I mean? Like really understand what kind of job you're trying to do and who you're presenting it to. Because a lot of the times, too, the recruiters that are there have a really good eye because they recruit for these studios, but they sometimes aren't always artists. And so for them, for just keeping that in mind also will help. You know, like you may not always be showing your portfolio to a person that understands being an artist. And so making it very clear and making it clear what you can do for them is always helpful.
And another question in that same vein, do you have any advice for not so recent art grads, those of us who are beyond 6 months to a year, who no longer qualify for many internships, but are still under 5 years?
Well, I mean, mm, this industry, I think you would agree, Ted, is made up of persistence. So being
Yes.
persistent is very important, and like you know, one, I don't think it's very helpful to put yourself on a deadline, because then, you know, you set yourself up for all these different expectations and pressures. But this industry is very you have to be kind of persistent to get in, and I know, but for that specific question, I don't know how it works at other studios, but I do know at Disney, their training program is for the recent grads within 3 years of graduation. So that's how I was able to get in, because I think I was only within a year or two or whatever when I applied. And so, and also, I don't know if this is totally kosher to say, but they don't actually really check that much either, you know. So if you have a, but the bottom line is that though, if you have a good portfolio and you apply yourself and you look at the industry and you understand where it's headed or the level that you need to get at to get a job, and it's reflected in your portfolio, I think there's enough work out there there's more work out there than you would expect. Maybe it's not your first dream job, but it's you never know where things are going to go. I mean, I think my first job ever was at a small MMO company in Albany that was like maybe 5 people, or no, 8. 8 people were there, and it was really small, but it was a tight-knit group. I had so much fun. The people were amazing, and so many unexpected, it's not a big name studio or anything like that, but so many amazing unexpected things happened. Like, I don't know if you know this, Ted, but I worked on the Kung Fu Panda MMO for kids
Oh,
online.
wow. I did not know that, actually.
That was my first job. So, and it didn't do very well. Like, I don't think it's there anymore. But the studio that did it was great, and through that, actually, my boss was good friends with Ian McKegg, and so I met him also
Right.
and drew with him. So it's like you never know where any of these opportunities will take you. So, you know, and if you are easy to work with and nice, it goes a long way too, because I think every job I've gotten since Frankenweenie has something to do with Frankenweenie. On Henry Suggs' project, I was recommended by my production designer, and that's how I got in there. It wasn't purely just they saw my portfolio and liked it. I mean, somebody had to recommend me because they actually weren't sure, because I didn't have anything in my portfolio. I couldn't show anything from Frankenweenie. So, you know, you take, it may not be what you want, you know, your first job, but everything goes somewhere, you know, and you can never really see or predict where it will happen. Like, maybe the best thing for you is starting somewhere small and going, you know what I mean? Like, you just, I mean, there's all these expectations that art students have for themselves, but the reality is that it's not always clear, and everybody is so young. I mean, everybody coming out of school is so young that it's like you have 40 years to screw up your life. It's not going to happen now. So just apply yourself and do what you love, and then try your best to get better. Like, participate in programs like CGMA, go to CTN, all this stuff. It's, I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do, you know, no matter where you are in your career or where you are at all, you know?
Right. Actually, reminded me of an expression I was told a lot growing up, is that you have way more years ahead of you than you do behind you. So the
Yeah.
world is basically your oyster in a sense. And one of the last questions I'm going to ask actually is, well, the person asking it phrased it this way. This is a very personal question, so Helen is welcome not to answer. But they were just wondering, they wanted to know, how old are you actually? Because you look very young. So they want to know what your age is.
People have guessed 16. Actually, I'm 26.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
I'm
feel
26.
ancient now. Thank you.
No, no. I mean, it's just like, it's one of those, I don't know. But yeah, I still get carded all the time. So there's that.
Well, on that note, Helen, I would like to thank you on behalf of everybody in attendance for a wonderful interview with the master session. I really appreciate you taking time out of your Saturday to basically talk with us and share some of your work and experiences. Again, I really appreciate it, and I know that all the people in attendance loved hearing you share some of the stuff you went over today. Even though you didn't get the chance to finish your demo there,
It wasn't going to happen. It was just never going to happen. I'm so sorry.
Everyone is really excited about, you know, seeing how the class goes and participating. And for those of you who have not registered yet, please sign up for her class. I believe if it hasn't sold out, it's pretty close to doing that. I'm not up to date on those numbers yet, but I would say jump on it as soon as possible. And again, registration for our fall term is still open. Another 3 weeks left on it. So again, please jump in those classes as soon as possible, because they do sell out pretty quickly. And beyond that, stay tuned next week for our next interview session. We're going to have basically Anthony, and I pronounced his last name incorrectly. I know it's Eptekari. For those of you who will be around next week, just I would say drop in on that talk as well. And by the way, I apologize for the mix-up with the times between Helen's and his. That was my fault, actually. For those of you who got an email saying that the time had changed, originally hers was scheduled for today. But anyway, it worked out. We had quite a good turnout. And again, Helen, thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you guys so much for coming. I was really afraid I was going to fuck it up, but I guess
You did an awesome job. Thank you. And everybody, enjoy your weekends, and I'll see you guys later. Take care.